Welcome to My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 225. Afreilich and Chodesh Elul. We're just concluding the second day of Rosh Chodesh Elul, which began yesterday on Shabbos, was the 30th of Av, which also is the first day of Rosh Chodesh, first day of the new month. And the second day is today, Sunday, Rosh Chodesh Elul. And this actually begins the counting of Elul, so it's actually the first day of Elul. There are two opinions when Moshe went up on the mountain for the third time to ask and beseech God for compassion and forgiveness for the Jewish people. There's an opinion that it was on the 30th of Av, and there's the first day of Rosh Chodesh, and the other opinion that it was on Rosh Chodesh, the first day of Elul. This is relevant regarding to when you start blowing shofar, and Shulchan Aruch brings the different commentaries. In this case, in this year, obviously, Shabbos was Rosh Chodesh, so you don't blow shofar anyway, the first day. But definitely, according to all opinions, Moshe is already now either going on the mountain or already on the mountain with the last 40 days. As we know, he received the Torah on Shavuos. 40 days later, 39 days later, 40 days later, Moshe comes down from the mountain with the luchis, with the tablets that were heard by the Jewish people, by the Seres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments that were heard by Matan Torah, but they had built a golden calf. Moshe shatters the luchos, that's the 17th of Tammuz, goes back up on the mountain to ask God to forgive the people. Not that they weren't accountable, but he wanted forgiveness. He spends 40 days from Shivasar B'Tammuz till Rosh Chodesh Elul. And these are considered Yemei Kas, not days, not pleasant days, days of wrath. Because God did not acquiesce, did not give in to Moshe's request. It's one of the more mysterious periods in history, because what exactly did happen there, we don't know all the details. Be interesting, but we do know that Moshe came down but did not give up, and he went up a third time. So it would be the first time would have been Shavuos, the second time Shavuos B'Tammuz, and now a third time today, or yesterday, Rosh Chodesh Elul, he goes up for a third time, and this time he would be successful, and 40 days from today is when? Is the 10th of Tishrei, the holy day, the holiest day of Yom Kippur. Achaz B'Shoneh, when Hashem says, Salachti K'dvarecha, as we repeat 3 times and declare the night of Kol Nidrei, 40 days, 40 nights from tonight. And that would be in Yom Kippur when God says, yes, I've forgiven as you spoke, as you asked me to. So this is a momentous period in time. That's why this month is called Chodesh HaRachamim, the month of compassion, because God showed compassion. He revealed to Moshe the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. The entire account is described in Parshas Kisisa, in the book of Exodus, in the book of Shmei, Parsha Kisisa, Moshe's intimate interactions with Hashem, their dialogue back and forth, and he reveals to Moshe that invoke these secret 13 attributes, the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, whenever you need something, which is exactly what we do in this month, and specifically we do it on Yom Kippur. Specifically Yom Kippur, the end of the Yom Kippur, and Slichas and so on, but through this period of time, this is Chodesh HaRachamim. It's also called the Chodesh HaCheshbon, the month of accounting, because we make an accounting in this last month of the year for all that we've done the past year. And it's also Chodesh HaChana, a month of preparation to the new year, to Rosh Hashanah and the upcoming year. It's a month where we also call the month of Melech Basada, when the king is in the field. So the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, as the Alter Rebbe explains in the Likutei Torah Re'eh, actually on the page, as the Rebbe points out, Lamed Beis, Daf Lamed Beis, he explains that Lamed Beis Lev, which is again compassion, like Tanya Lamed Perek Lamed Beis talks about love, which is Lev and love and Ava. In this case, the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, and the Alter Rebbe asked the question, what makes a Yontif, a holiday? It's not just a random day chosen, it's because on that day, there radiates and shines and illuminates a particular Hamshach of Elokus. That's what makes it a Yontif. Since in Chodesh Elul it's called the Chodesh HaRachamim. Why? Because then we radiates the 13 attributes of compassion, of mercy, Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. So why is it not Yom Tov? Month of Elul, all the days should be Yom Tov. That's what defines a Yom Tov. Hamshach of Elokus, an additional Hamshach, more than a regular day, when it's more concealed in garments. And he answers with the famous Moshel of Melech Basada, that before the Melech returns to his city, to his palace, his inner sanctum, he meets the people in Basada. So the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim radiate on our terms in the mundane, in the menial, in the mundane labor as we work the fields, each of us in our own way. So in a way, it's a higher hamshacha, but hamshacha on our terms, in our world, in our life, allowing us to access the King and ask Him for everything we want, and He shows us a smile and a joy, as it's explained in the Maimorim, and the term Yechiel v'Reshayin, as he explains, when the Rebbe explains from the Maimon in Tafshin, with the Friedrich Rebbe adds and explains the Maimon of Anila Deidi V'Deidi Li of Lukutei Torah. So the month is rich with opportunity, with possibilities, the ability to achieve the thing that we all look for most, which is change, growth, to realize that we're not, to recognize and appreciate that we're not stuck in the status quo. Life is not static. We have the ability to be able to grow and get out of any situation we're in, whether it's a negative situation or a positive one, to get even better and to grow. That's what this month is. And we have the keiches from above, yet the initiative has to come from us, Anila Deidi, and then we are guaranteed, and we're told, V'Deidi Li, I am to my beloved. That's the most famous acronym of Elul. Anila Deidi, I am to my beloved, means we reach to our beloved, and our beloved responds, V'Deidi Li. So we do have to take the initiative. However, it's a month where we have opportunity, abundant opportunity that we don't have other times of the year, for some of the reasons I gave, and there's more reasons as well. So during this month, we increase in learning Torah. Aryeh b'Sheshanim, that's the end of the pasuk. Sheshanim is also halachas, but even more so, increase in davening, which is also connected to Aryeh b'Sheshanim, as is brought in the Sichos and the Maimorim, the different meanings. So we increase in all matters of holiness, obviously in introspection, and we go through the step-by-step process, as Moshe did on the mountain, recreating his journey in our own personal lives, and that is to be able to access a deeper force that allows us to transcend and allows us to overcome blocks or impediments or challenges or phobias or inhibitions of all sorts. That's what this month is about. It's also the mazel of this month is the mazel of love as well, Virgo, the mazel of Psula, the virgin, which refers to the concept of marriage as well. Anila Deidi V'Deidi Li. In this case, like Shir Hashirim is all based on the relationship between God and the human being as a relationship of spouses. So Elul has many messages and lessons in the context of Chassidus applying it to our personal lives. It's not just a month that we do certain customs, we blow her shofar or blow shofar and do other things that we do, add in tzedakah and so on. It also is a time of deep introspection, a deep evaluation of a person's life and the ability to be able to achieve anything that we set our minds to. And Yom Kippur is the conclusion of this 30-day period this month, and then the 40-day period, I should say, which of course breaks into 30 days of Elul, and then the 10 more days of Aseret Yimei Tshuva from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur. So it's interestingly, Moshe was on the mountain on Rosh Hashanah and came down on Yom Kippur with the second tablets. So all this is an opportunity for all of us. People often ask the question, how can I get out of my situation? I feel stuck, I feel trapped, I'm trapped in patterns and habits. Well, this is the month to do so. So obviously we need a willpower of our own and a certain resolute commitment, but there are times when you have more strength to do so, both to make the commitment and to live up to it. So being that we're in the second day of Rosh Chodesh, the first day of Elul, Rosh is Rosh, like Rosh Hashanah, Chassidus explains, means not just Tchila of the month, it's not just the beginning of the month, it's the central nervous system. So this gives us power for the entire month. This is also the week of Shoftim, and as we've been doing the last few weeks, this year I decided to apply the Shiva de Nechemta. So the Shiva de Nechemta began actually the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av. So really the second half of Av, which as I've mentioned a number of times, its Mazel, Aryeh, also builds Elul and Tishrei. Aryeh, Leo, which is the Mazel of the month of Churban, of destruction, is actually the month of building through Aryeh, Rosh Tevis, it's a correct acronym, Aryeh, Aleph, Resh, Yud, Hey, Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Eshayin Rabbah. So we began the 7 weeks of consolation right after Tisha B'Av, Shabbos Nachmu, and now we're in the 4th week. So essentially the next 4 weeks will be 3 weeks in Av and 4 weeks in El. That will make 7 weeks, leading up to the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, when we'll conclude these weeks of consolation. And that will lead to 2 weeks of tshuva, Trei de Tiyufta, which is the Shabbos tshuva, and another Shabbos that usually takes place between Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot is 2 Shabbos. So interestingly, that it's all interwoven. The destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and all the sad events that happen in Av and Tisha B'Av and the 3 weeks and Shavuos B'Tammuz, all becomes the seeds and catalyst and springboard for the growth of Elul, the compassion of Elul. As we said, why was he on the mountain asking for forgiveness? Because of the sin of the golden calf. When did that begin? That was the first tragic event that happened, the beginning of the 3 weeks, the 17th of Tammuz. And all the other events. And they all lead to, because the Chet HaEgel, which is in a way, a recreation and in a negative way, reintroduced the Zuma, the toxins of the Chet Tzadas, of the tree of the sin of the tree of knowledge, the dissonance and displacement that created. And that concluded, of course, with the destruction of the temple on Tisha B'Av. But it's not an end in itself. That's the beginning of the story. And what's Moshe's job on the mountain and during the month of Elul is to gain forgiveness and reconciliation after this break, after this loss. Which is why Hashem says, thank you for breaking these tablets. Because through the breaking of the tablets, he preserved the Jewish people, as Rashi explains, and explained in many places. So even though it was a break, the break was meant to bring a greater building. Seisa manas livnes, a destruction to bring even a greater Beis Hamikdash. And this refers to every break in our lives. Every crack that happens, every wound, every injury, physical, spiritual, psychological, emotional, that happens in a person's life, has the ability and the capacity, that's what Elul teaches us, to repair, to correct, to mend, and to make it even stronger than it was before, because what happens in Yom Kippur is even more than what happened by Matan Torah the first time. All this is the story of Elul. So Shiva de Nechemta fits right in. It's a consolation that came after that, those negative events that continues to be intensifying in these weeks of Elul, because Elul's mission is consolation, not just to console, make us feel good, but consolation means to heal. It's a time of healing, a time of growth. So where are we now in the 4th week of the Shiva de Nechemta? And according to the Medrash, Psik Terap's, that the Avud Raham brings, it's a dialogue. The 7 weeks of consolation is a dialogue between the Jewish people and God. And God first sends them the Nevi'im, the prophets, to console them. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. The Jews say, why are you forsaking us? Even though you're consoling us, but why don't you come yourself? And after 2 weeks after these 3 weeks comes this 4th week, and what do we say in the Haftarah? Anechi, Anechi hu menachemchem. I, God Himself, not just one Anechi, a double Anechi, will console you. And I think you can assume immediately what that means. Where's the first Anechi? Where do we hear Anechi? Anechi Hashem Elokecha by Matan Torah. That happened before the break. That happened before the breaking of the tablets, which followed as a result of the building of the golden calf. There was one Anechi. And even that's an extremely high level. Anechi Hashem Elokecha. As Chassidus explains, Elokecha is the way the divine manifests in existence. Immanent energy, divine energy. Havaya is the way the transcendent divine energy. And Anechi le'islam is le'b'shum eis v'le'b'shum kates. Anechi, when you say I, even Havaya, even though it's the Shema Etzem, it's a name that expresses God's essential essence. As opposed to Elokim, which is the God within nature. Elokim is Gematria Hateva. That Anechi even transcends Havaya, because Anechi says I, not even Ani, Anechi. It reflects something that's Leiber Samas, Leiber Shumes, Leiber Shumkes. It's a name that can be hinted in a letter or even in a dot, even in the crown on top of the letter. That's Matan Torah, because the Gili of Etzem, the Gili of Atzmus, Ata Arizal Ladas, comes this week and we say, Anechi, Anechi, hu menachemchem, a double Anechi. Because Matan Torah was, in a sense, the Luchas Hashem, was the Aved of Tzadikim. That's when everything was going well. So one Anechi was a tremendous revelation from the highest levels. However, once there's a break and once there's a mistake that was made, an error, a grave error, now the healing needs two things. You need to reach even deeper, and one Anechi is not enough, you need a double Anechi. On the other hand, you can say even deeper that through the negative we come to reach even deeper inside of ourselves, and that's why tzaddikim, why? They can't even stand, they can't even have the capacity to go there, because it's a double anechi that can only come through the negative. So the l'chatchila, initially, you're not allowed to sin and do tshuva. But after the fact, it brings you to a place that even the first Matan Torah cannot bring. So to speak, the luchas is the Matan Torah, I should say, not the first Matan Torah. There was only one Matan Torah. Matan Torah of the first tablets. And the second tablets are far higher and far greater, which is why it says in many Shoftim that when Moshe came down with the second tablets, that's when this glow on his face. He became a leader, not just a scholar. By Shavuos, the Luchas Hashem, by the first tablets, he was a Talmud Chacham, a Rosh Shiva. By the second, he became a leader. He begged for forgiveness and gained forgiveness. That's a leader. He knows how to be a shepherd of the people, even in their time of need. And that was a double anechi. What that means for us personally, it means that obviously God should bless us all. We should all have a revelatory, good, positive approach to things. However, if we do break, something breaks, there is a betrayal. We betray ourselves or we betray someone else. We hurt ourselves or we hurt someone else. There's some form of destruction, some form of loss. So we're told, not only can you get back to where you were, you get to a double anechi. A double. And double here, of course, in Kedusha doesn't just mean in quantity, it also in quality. Because you're coming after the break. So not just Nachamu Ami, which is also a double consolation, but from the prophet. Now it's from Anechi, a double Anechi. Much more can be elaborated upon, but this is pretty clear and also very direct, relevant to the period in time which we are, which is Elul, coming after all the events that happened before, the sad events. It's also Parshas Shoftim. Shoftim, the Rebbe explains from the Sifsei Koyin Ala Teira, that Shoftim v'Shoftim titlecha b'chol sharecha. You shall appoint in all your municipalities, in all your gates, literally, you shall appoint Shoftim, which are judges, and Shetrim, which are police, law enforcers. What is this in Aveda? In Aveda is the Aveda of Elul. What are the sharecha? So the Sifsei Koyin brought in Samach Tzedek and Eidat Teira, and the Rebbe cites it quite often. B'chol sharecha refers to the 7 gates each of us have. There are only 7 gates that connect us to the world around us. And those are our 2 eyes, our 2 ears, that's 4, our 2 nostrils, that's 6, and our mouth. Take away those 7 gates, then we're a self-contained person. Think of a walled city. Nothing can go in, nothing can come out. So the gates are the gates are the ones that allow things in. When we look at things, we see the world around us. Others see us. We hear things, we smell things, and we taste things, and we speak. Says the Pasuk, Shoftim v'Shoftim titlecha b'chol sharecha, appoint judges and law enforcers and gatekeepers to make sure that what goes into your life is carefully chosen. That's the point of a gate. When you see a city, walled city like Yerushalayim, what are the gates for? The gates are necessary things to go in and out. But you have gatekeepers because the wall, it's a very holy city, a sacred city. Ir ktanu ze'aguf. As the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, the body is like a small city, it has a wall around it. And you have to be very careful what enters, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, and what you speak about. So that's what the Pasuk is saying, giving us directive, what we do in El. Especially after there's been a break, after there's been a fall. El tells us that's what you need to do. So right as we enter the first week of Elul, we begin right away. Shoftim v'Shoftim titlecha b'chol sharecha. The lesson today especially is acute and profound because we are so exposed, over-inundated, overstimulated by so much stimuli. Online, on the internet, technology, everywhere we go. We're not living in a small shtetl where there's already just a wall around our city. There's things constantly bombarding us from all directions. Some things that are permissible but not necessary, and many things that are not, that are prohibited. So that we are told, create gatekeepers. You control your life. You control what enters your life. Don't think just because things are happening and you have eyes and ears and nose and a mouth, everything has to enter. No. Titlecha b'chol sharecha. Place them at your gates and be gatekeepers. that makes sure that what enters is appropriate. So with that, let us now go to some questions. And I'll first begin with a dedication. Always like to dedicate the program right at the beginning, but I'll dedicate it right now. Here's the dedication. A gracious dedication sponsored by Shmuley Wachtel in memory of his dear beloved brother Pinchas Eliyahu ben Gershon, whose yahrzeit is on Rosh Chodesh Elul. Shmuley Wachtel has devoted nearly half of his life toward helping thousands of families with both simple and unique life insurance strategies. If you haven't met with him yet, you can call him at 786-302-1621 or email sam_wachtel@npcfinancial.com. Thank you for your sponsorship, and this is an opportunity. We spoke about life insurance last week, and the opportunity, if you have a business or you have a cause or an interest or personal dedication, you want to honor a loved one or the memory of a loved one, it's an excellent opportunity. This program reaches many, many people and who listen to it intently. So you can help sponsor and make these programs continue to grow and make them possible. It's a free program, free service. So please, either you can dedicate, you can sponsor, corporate sponsor, personal sponsorships. Go to meaningfullife.com/sponsorship. Or you can call us at our office. I'll be happy to honor your request. And of course, it goes for a great cause, besides all the other benefits. With that, let me also announce that here's the opportunity. If you want to ask any question, any comment, anything, completely confidentially, completely anonymously, go to meaningfullife.com/mylife. There you'll also find a wide array of resources, beginning with the archives of all free previous programs. They're all there, all the topics, all time-stamped in the YouTube version of the videos, which means you can go straight to the topic without having to listen to it all through a hyperlink, as well as all the essays of the past 4 years, and we continuously post new essays as they come in and as I read them every week, 3 per week usually. Okay, those are the announcements. Let us now go to a few more questions, to a few new questions, and I will again assure you that all questions that have been asked will be addressed. And I'm trying to catch up, but there's always new ones coming, but I'm going in order as they have been received. From time to time, I may consolidate them in order to be able to just talk about a topic that's different questions that are asked or follow-ups. But all those questions will be asked, so please do not get dejected if you do not see your question answered. It will be addressed. I assure you, believe that. Okay, some cross-reference, first of all, to what I've spoken about so far, the lessons from the second day of Rosh Chodesh Elul. So episodes 30, 31, 34, 79, 80, 129 and 130, and 224. And regarding Parshas Shoftim, 80, 130, and regarding the Shiva de Nechemta, this is a follow-up, in a way, a continuation, a continuing story that we began in episode 222, 223, 224, and now we did for the week 4 and 225. First question, new question that's being asked is about evolution. Hey, Rabbi, Adam and Chava are the ancestors of all mankind, the entire human race. How do we explain all the diversity in physical appearance among their descendants? Okay. Well, let me amplify the question. I assume the question is, since it's two people with unique features, and here we see now millions, billions of people, 7.5 billion people, and the Ken Yirbu, and they are all, and the Ein Partzafei and Shenis. Ein they say in Shavis, Ein Partzafei and Shavis. Their faces are not alike. So how do you explain such diversity? Actually, it's a question asked in the Mishnah. It's not posed as a question, it's posed as an answer, but it explains it. The Mishnah in Sanhedrin, Daf Lamed Zayin, says exactly that. It speaks about Lefikach Nivra Adam Yechidi. A person was created as Adam was created as an individual, not in a group, to teach us all that each of us is an individual. And he says there clearly, he gives the example of like a mold. He's the mold, the human mold. And that mold, every person is taken from that mold with a unique, particular uniqueness. And that's why a person is responsible to say, Chayav Adam Leimer, B'shvili Nivre'ela. The entire world was created for me. Not in an arrogant way, in a responsible way. And that when you save a life, it's like saving a universe. And when you, God forbid, the opposite, it's like destroying a universe. and makes it very clear that b'chesme shalodam, everyone was created b'chesme. Chesme literally means b'chesme, like the chesem is a stamp. Think of it like a signet ring or a stamp of a king or a authority that it makes an engraving, an impression, a piece of wax. So he's the model. And that model, everyone was created in, and everyone was created with a different particular version of it. How is this explained? This is explained that the fact of the matter is the human being was taken, as the Torah says, was taken, God took a piece of earth that really from all over the world. Remember that, that's important. Not just one clump of earth, but earth came from everywhere. He took earth from the ground, and imbued it with the soul of life. So there you have, it wasn't just a piece of one piece of earth, and earth, how different can one piece of earth be from another? Even earth, by the way, you go to different parts of the world, and even in one part of the world, there's different levels of earth, different colors, different levels of moisture. You see certain things grow in certain parts of the world because of the soil is different than in other parts of the world. It could be a richer soil, a non-richer. So you see diversity right there. Once you include the neshama part, that adds even more diversity. Even though you could say the body is not affected by the neshama, but the point is that is the divine hand that shaped it. And shaped it in a way like a mold. So it's one mold, so we all have a similarity in the fact that we all have, thank God, healthy bodies are born, 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 eyes and the head. Melech Lev Kovid, which is Melech Rosh Tevis, Moyach Lev Kovid, the structure. And that all human beings are equal. And yet within that, there's infinite possibilities. So think of it like musical notes. Same musical notes, but you can play them in so many different ways. In the language of Kabbalah, Chassidus, Esesphiris, what consists of the 10 faculties of the soul, which evolved from the 10 spheres above, so spiritual faculties and attributes is 10. But the 10 can be combined in an infinite amount of ways. And as such, there is an infinite amount of possibilities. And you see this even in one family. Why don't you ask another question? You see, in one family, you could have children from the same parents, biological parents, they look very different. Sometimes color hair very different. Okay, you'll say there's some similarities, but there's similarities in the human race as well. There are people you meet, there are similarities, not even in the same family. So we all have common features, or you could say common elements. But the common elements, there's the millions of different variations. Even identical twins are not exactly identical, especially non-identical twins. So the point is that there's something that's in common among the entire human race, which traces us back to Adam and Eve. And then there's the diversity that each of us has, as the Mishnah says in Sanhedrin. And this continues to grow, because as the different features emerge, so, the Machava may have been, let's say, dark, or they may have a certain color hair. But remember, there are other strains included in that, because being created by God, God implanted in it many variations. It may take a generation or 2 for that to emerge. So as the genetic pool begins to diversify, even though it originates from the same source, the features, what becomes dominant, the dominant gene, the dominant feature becomes different. So that's where you have the differences between people. So you can have 2 people with blue eyes, but a small difference. And then when you compare the eyes and the color hair and the other features of the body, there you find all the difference, which is quite fascinating. That's the same face, but 7.5 billion different faces. Okay, what is it relevant to us in the language of Chassidus? That we each have something unique and individual about us, and therefore a unique responsibility. At the same time, we have something in common that connects us all. Imena nili mili, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Each of us has our unique look, our unique features, our unique strengths, our unique skills and talents. And then, imanila atzmi ma'ani, if I'm only for myself, what am I? We all need each other. Using, the analogy of musical notes. Each is playing its particular music, but we need each other to create the cosmic symphony. Okay, next question. Is the Rebbe's position on Zionism different than that of the Rebbe Rashab and the Rebbe Rayatz? Hello, Rab Simon. The Rebbe Rashab and the Rebbe Rayatz were opposed to Zionism. Then Hashem performed the great miracles of the 6-day war, the Gulf War, the return of all Yidden from Russia, and the Rebbe encouraging settling all the land. How do you understand the change? Okay. Firstly, let me refer you in general to the topic of Zionism. We talked about it in episodes 89 and 90. Let me first give an introduction about change in general. A Rebbe is more than just a person that is smart and intelligent and is knowledgeable and learned and a scholar. And therefore you could have, like you have in Torah, you have Shammai and Hillel, you have different scholars, different opinions. You're talking about a Rebbe is a Noseh B'Yisrael. You're talking about, especially in the context of Chabad Rabbeim, Moshe Rabbeinu of each generation, Moshe Rabbeinu. And each generation has its Moshe. So the concept whether the Rebbe would change something from the previous Rabbeim is itself quite questionable. I would say it's abgefrekt, meaning it's not possible. Because as he says in Torah Shalom about the Alter Rebbe, that if he was in the generation of Tanoim, he would have been a Tana. And if he was in the generation of Amoraim, he would have been an Amoraim. If the Rebbe lived in the generation of the Alter Rebbe, he would have been the Alter Rebbe. And if the Alter Rebbe lived now, he would have been the Rebbe. In other words, each generation, the Rebbe of the generation does what is necessary in that generation. Parnas Lafi Hadar. So first of all Rebbes are one, fundamentally, be'etzem. As the Rebbe says in the famous Parshas Vayetze, Yud Kislev Sicha Tovshin Yud. Tovshin Yud. The Rebbe says that why didn't he write Shalshelos HaMoyer on the Sharblat, on the cover page of the Kohos, of the Sforim of the Rabbeim? It says Shalshelos Ha'er. Shalshelos means the chain of light, not the chain of the luminary. The Rabbeim are Moyer, they're not Eir. The Rebbe said he was asked, and he said, because in Moyer, they're stuck in Ishtalshlus. In the essence, there's no Ishtalshlus, it's all one. It's one luminary. It's one Moshe Rabbeinu. It's one Etzem. It's one Nosia, Imed Beinechem Bein Hashem Elokeichem. A Mamutza Machaber. One interface. The Moshe of each generation. In Giluyim, in the Eir of each Nasi. So we say the Alter Rebbe, as much as we can understand in these things, which we don't understand much, the Alter Rebbe is Chochmeh, the Mittler Rebbe is Biנה, the Tzemach Tzedek Das, the Rebbe Maresh Netzach, the Rebbe Rashab Hei, the Friedrich Rebbe Yesod, the Rebbe Malchus. The different Ushpizin, each one has their role. But that's in their Eir, as they express themselves, reflect. But the Etzem is one. So the entire question to say that the Rebbe had a different attitude from the Rebbe, Friedrich Rebbe, who is completely mekusher to, as a Chassid Rebbe, on the Rebbe Rashab, and all the way to the Alter Rebbe, I think is preposterous. Like, for example, someone asked me a similar question. The Rebbe said in the famous Vayeshev Tovshinun Beis Sicha, where he said that in the time of the Alter Rebbe opposed Napoleon and supported Alexander because it would have been better for the Ruchnius of Jews, even though it would have been worse for their Gashmis. The Rebbe said today, in this generation, we've already come to a point where it could be Mevar Tzarfas. So someone once asked me, okay, so the Rebbe was, because the Rebbe was Kavyochel more modern. So he had a different position. No, he didn't have a different position. That's not what he said. He said the Alter Rebbe's time was not ready yet. So if the Rebbe was then, it wouldn't have been ready either. And the Alter Rebbe was now. He would do what the Rebbe did, which now the time has come. Berurim, things change. The world has changed. So the fact that the Rebbe introduced, let's say, Shem Mitzvahs B'nei is because the matzah of the world is different. The chefts of the world is different, not because the Rebbe is a different Rebbe. And you could even say the Eibishter sends the right Rebbe, and each time with the right education, with the right training, whatever you want to call it. The Alter Rebbe's inyan was what his inyan was, Shnei Eir, what he did. And so the principal idea that change is not, in my opinion, so I would say, I would negate any such possibility. Now, so then why do we see a different attitude to so-called Zionism and Israel? And let's spell it out a little more. When you look at, for example, in Kuntrus and Mayon, page 45 in the introduction, there the Friedrich Rebbe cites the letters, the manuscript and the writings of the Rebbe Rashab. In Tofrei Samach Gimel, Tofrei Samach, he came out with a letter attacking so-called secular Zionism. And then he was met by one of the people who came to defend it, and the Rebbe Rashab defended his own position, why he's opposed to it, and then put it in writing. And it's quite harsh, quite strong. There are 3 tainas there, and the Rebbe Rashab answers each one of them. You can look it up yourself, I'm not going to go through the details. But clearly, for the different reasons, opposed it for the simple reason that the goal of the secular Zionism was to take Yiddishkeit away from Torah mitzvahs, to turn it into something nationalistic, something cultural, something that you could be a complete Jew without Torah mitzvahs, chas v'shalom. And that's what he was negating. And he felt it was undermining, as did other Gedalim and other Jewish leaders, that it would undermine the whole idea of Torah mitzvahs, which itself was very, very fragile times in general. And you can read there more the details. Friedrich Rebbe Though we don't have as much in writing as that, but we also have his position, as was the position of others that opposed the secular Zionism. Now I should add that the Rebbe Rashab himself initially, before that opposition, was part of the founding of Agudas Yisrael, which was a religious brand that would the religious Zionists, so to speak. But then he changed his position because he saw that it would be hijacked. He would not have any say really or control over it. And of course, the issues continue to rage on today because you have people who are virulent anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and you don't see the Rebbe have that type of position. You don't see him. You see him receiving Zionist leaders, whether it's heads of state or the President Shazar, different government officials. You see the Rebbe supporting, meaning his Chassidim paying taxes and supporting, even going to the army. You don't see that type of opposition that somehow that wouldn't even benefit from anything from the Zionist government. So it seems, as the questioner asked, that there is a change in position. So how do we explain that? So a few points I'd like to make. Number one, we have to understand what was the opposition really of the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab's opposition is, and I would say the Rebbe's opposition is exactly the same, is to the principles and the values of these individuals that were leading that movement. And nothing to do with Torah. You're talking about secular people who felt, for whatever reasons, political reasons, and it could have even been good intentions, but they were secular people who had no respect for Yiddishkeit or Torah mitzvahs. They were part of a movement that we don't need, that we've outgrown that. And the state and its culture, and just another country, just like there's a country in Germany for Germans, and France for French, and England for England, Israel for Jews. And one of the proofs is because they actually didn't even want Israel in the beginning. Uganda was an option, and I think Cyprus was an option. They were talked about Cyprus, different options, until they realized that the Jews won't go for that. To go even further, and I don't like to speak negative, but if you read the original secular Zionist, and I don't even like the word Zionist because Zionist, that Zion, Erev Zion, is we speak about Zionism. True Zionism is Torah Zionism. I'm talking about Zionism in the language of the cultural language of Zionism without Yiddishkeit, without Judaism, without Torah, without halacha. Originally, they felt that the solution to the Jewish problem, which was assimilation, anti-Semitism, they felt was mass baptism. It only later became the search of a national state, of a homeland. So you see that these were people who either didn't have any knowledge of what Judaism is all about, or may have had knowledge and had very malicious intentions, because they were like the maskilim, some that felt that the Judaism now has to be replaced with a nation, with a country, and with the culture and the politics of a country. And that's what defines Judaism. Just like there were different isms that tried to replace what we call Torah mitzvahs. So these people had intentions that, what do you think, a Jewish leader, if you're a Jewish leader, and your whole mission is to advocate and uphold and strengthen and bolster commitment to Torah mitzvahs, of course this goes against exactly all of Yiddishkeit. And you even feel it's a threat to Jews because Jews survived not on any ism, not on Yiddishism, not on culture, not on theater, not on nationalism. All these things never kept the Jews together. What kept the Jews together? It was the commitment to Torah mitzvahs. So wherever they went in the world, that's what kept them together. So of course you're going to go to battle, ideological battle against an ideology that you see not only as corrupt but destructive. Who would not go against that? The only reason that some religious people went along because they thought, as some of the arguments that were presented to Rebbe Rashab, that's true, a lot of it is something we can't accept, but the homeland part maybe we can embrace. And let's begin with that, and then we'll spread Yiddishkeit afterwards. But at the time, before there was a homeland, before there was the actual reality, it was an ideological disagreement, which makes total sense under the circumstances. And there's no question that the Rebbe been then, he would have been the Rebbe Rashab and would have opposed it for the same reasons. And not only that, till this day, the Rebbe, and if you look at the Sikhs, opposes an ideology that compromises Torah mitzvahs. So what changed? Nothing changed from the perspective of the ideology. What changed was the realities on the ground changed. Realities on the ground, whether we like it or not, or whatever the reasons that God in his mysterious ways, that 1948, yes, the partition, the UN partition, and maybe the Balfour Declaration before, created a reality on the ground that gave Jews a right to establish a state. How do we look at this state? Does it have any Torah value? Is it the state that Mashiach is establishing? Absolutely not. But to say that now you have a place and there's a kibbutz of Eden, a group of Eden, 1 million, 2 million, or then hundreds of thousands, doesn't matter the number. And today, can Yirbu over 6 million? More than any other place in the world, to just ignore that and say, oh, I'm ideologically opposed to the concept of a secular state. There are Jews involved. And there's pikuach nefesh involved, life and death. And Jews need electricity, and they need protection, and they need police, and they need utilities. So the facts on the ground, they're no different than the Crown Heights Community Council, or a French Community Council, or a Russian Community Council. A community council is necessary. Does it have Torah value? It has Torah value as much as any council has. But the Torah value of what, in the words of the Rebbe Rashab, regarding a different issue, Nish mitun zeratzen zay megangen in Golos. Not with our will did we go into Golos. Nish mitun zeratzen vel me'areis from Golos. Will we leave Golos? Only the Eibishter decides that. No Jew can decide that. So the idea of an aschalta de gula, that this is the beginning of Reishis Smichas Gulasenu, as the Rebbe puts it, Chaz v'sholom, Rachmana litzlan, that not. The fact that the divine providence led Jews there and allows Jews to live there and it's thrived, obviously we recognize that. And we recognize also the miracles, whether it was in 1948 or the miracles in the later wars, especially in the 6-Day War, because the miracle of God is God's choice. God creates a situation in a defensive war and allows the Jews to win so much land and Yerushalayim and so on. That's a hand of God. We know this even, Rachmana litzlan, even if an anti-Semite, and I'm not want to compare, is a doctor and he saves your life, you make a brichas hanisim. You thank God for the miracle. God chose this messenger. So to say that Jews, even if they're secular, and even if they have bad intentions, or whatever it is, I'm not saying they had bad intentions in 1967. It's not relevant to the point that God wants to make a miracle. Of course God can do miracles. God can do miracles in Golos, just like can bring the Geula. That's God's choice. That we have to have a strong army and do whatever possible. Absolutely. It's a sacred duty of a human being to protect other people. But that doesn't give it a Teredik memshala. It's not a memshala like Malchus Beis David, King David or King Solomon, or the other leaders that God himself sanctioned. And this doesn't matter who the prime minister, even if the prime minister was a religious Jew, and even if the parliament and Knesset was religious, that doesn't change this. Because only God decides when the Geula is going to come, and when he establishes Malchus Beis David, a Mashiach, and a leadership that will be a Teredik one. But to say that we go to war against, God forbid, people who are protecting other Jews and creating an order and organized system, absolutely not. So the change was the facts on the ground, and that's what the Rebbe responded to. Additionally, just as it was with other matters, even though initially there was a very deliberate war, you can say ideological war against Torah and mitzvahs by many secular Zionists, not all, by some. Today you could say Tanekah and Israel don't even know anymore. They're completely ignorant. So now, once they exist and they are there on the ground, why not use the opportunity to try to speak to them about Torah and mitzvahs? You think that Rebbe Rashab, if someone asked him, can I go speak to Theodor Herzl or to Nada or the others that he quotes and cites, and on a private level, to speak to them about bringing them to either put on film with them or something like that? Of course he'd say yes. But that doesn't mean you embrace their ideology, even if there's some redeeming factor in it. So the idea that we have now the opportunity to actually introduce people to Yiddishkeit, of course, why the Jews in Israel, including the leadership, including in the government, even the secular, and even the people who are anti, why shouldn't we use the opportunity to bring them as close to Yiddishkeit as possible? And do what we can. Now the opportunity is there. And learn Torah there, and study Torah, and build mazes of Torah. So I hope this answered the question. I elaborated a little more than I usually do because it's a sensitive topic. But the changes on the ground, and that's the only thing that there's to discuss in this regard, in this matter. And just as the Rebbe Rashab and the Frierdiker Rebbe would do what the Rebbe's did, same thing the Rebbe would have been then, of course there had been the same ideological opposition, and even there was the ideological opposition still remains. That's why the Rebbe was very against Aschalta de Gula or calling it anything, giving it Geula Dika value. Even though it's God's hand, and no question that many Jews coming from Russia and so on is definitely a form of kibbutz golius, you're gathering the exiles. But when you call kibbutz golius Geula, that's God's decision. Is he preparing the ground and helping in making Israel? Obviously, B'derech HaTeva makes it easier when you have already 6 million Jews there. But that's a thin line between saying that we are playing God. We're not playing God. Only God builds the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi and creates real kibbutz goliaths. But God can do so and begin doing so earlier, just like Gilead of Chassidus started earlier, which is also a foretaste, like Erev Shabbos, before Shabbos, you taste of the foods of Shabbos. Okay, next question. How to deal with loss? Why does the Torah speak only of Yaakov's devastation and inability to recover from losing Yosef, and not as applying the lessons of להשכילך to recognize a higher power and השגחה פרטית at work? So here's how the question was posed. Supreme Ashpia of the virtual Farbrengen, greetings and blessings. Thank you for your ongoing weekly virtual Farbrengens. They bring lots of light into the virtual universe and into the lives of your listeners, myself included. I have a question that relates very personally to me. When I divorced through a series of manipulations of the court systems, my ex-wife took my daughter. Sadly, we haven't seen each other in years. I'm happily remarried for many years, have a beautiful family, and have a very blessed life. But always have a very sad part of my heart in the fact that my daughter isn't given the blessings of having a father in her life and me in hers. Adding insult to injury, her mother is presently not frum and not raising her in the ways of Torah and Chassidus, so the pain is doubled. I take much comfort in saying Tehillim and in the lessons of להשכילך בינה, namely, that what appears to be tragedy and sadness has a higher purpose and is hidden but the ultimate of good. Recently, my ex-brother-in-law, who himself got divorced from my ex-wife's sister, wrote to tell me how lucky and blessed I am that I am not connected in day-to-day life with my ex-wife and her family, how truly sick and dysfunctional they are, and how they continue to try to make his life miserable. While he recognizes how hard it is for me to be separated from my daughter, he also sees how that separation has allowed me to rebuild my life and be productive. Sadly, he feels caught in a trap of lies, manipulation, and trickery, and yearns for the day to be free to resume his life. I can see the divine providence in my situation, albeit sad at the same time. My question revolves around Yaakov Avinu. Why is it when Yosef is sold into slavery in Egypt, and the Torah only seems to talk about Yaakov's sadness and inability to rehabilitate himself, of his being in a state of being perpetually devastated by his separation from Yosef? Why don't we see Torah highlighting the fact that Yaakov is applying the lessons of להשכילך בינה to recognize a higher power at work, and the השגחה פרטית at work? Was he taking that approach, or was he just brokenhearted and in the doldrums? Again, thanks so much. May we have much simcha in our lives. God bless. Well, first of all, even though the Torah does speak about the devastation, how he was mortified by it, but let's just talk about the end of the story. 22 years later, one of the ways that Yosef sends a sign to his father that he's still alive is by sending him agolis, sending him wagons, to remind him of the egla aruf, the word egla, the thing they learned when last time they saw each other. What does Yosef say to his brothers when they finally he reveals himself to them, and they're so embarrassed and humiliated? He says, "You didn't do this to me. Hashem sent me here to bring life to you and sustenance to you and our father." Who taught this Yosef to feel that way? Yaakov. So to say Yaakov did not have what Yosef embodied is obviously not correct. The fact that Torah doesn't emphasize it, first of all, there are hints to it in different expressions. But even without that, Torah Sheba'al Peh, and especially when you understand the circumstances, this was Yaakov's whole life. He was a man of God. He realized it was God. That still didn't take away from the pain. Maybe the Torah wants to emphasize that even though he knew it was an act of God, you could ask the question the other way around. He just accepts it and is never saddened. He was terribly saddened that it had to happen this way. But of course he surrendered to God's mystery, as every tzaddik did. So Bikish Yaakov Leisha B'Shalva, he wanted it to be at peace, says Rashi right away, Vayeshev, Kofza Lov Rugza Sheyesa, because that tzaddik can't be at peace in this world. You think Yaakov didn't understand the message? His whole life was that, as he told later Pare, that his life was short and painful. So he realized what he had to go through, and he realized there was a deeper purpose, and he definitely understood it, obviously in retrospect, after he reunited with Yosef. So the fact that Torah doesn't always emphasize does not mean it wasn't that way. And especially, as I said, it's also hinted to. And especially we see how Yosef himself behaved. So we learn from Yaakov all the elements. That on one hand, yes, we sometimes have to grieve. That's why we said Shiva. We don't just say God accepted it, God forbid when there's a loss. But at the same time, the big picture, there's always a bigger picture. And Yaakov for surely embraced that bigger picture. And you see it from his whole life. You see how he traveled. You see how his attitude. And you see ultimately when he's afraid to go down to Mitzrayim, Hashem says, I'm going with you and I will come back with you. All in Naila. And the 17 last years in Mitzrayim. I mean, he understood the Hashgacha Pratis of all of this. Yaakov was a man of Hashgacha Pratis, maybe more than, and in a revealed way, almost more than anybody when you look at his whole life story. Okay. Let's now go to some follow-up. Let's start with life insurance, which was last episode. So, to just sum up what I spoke about, there's nothing from the Rebbe against it. The Rebbe speaks about the emphasis on life as opposed to on death, the end of life, and actually learns lessons from life insurance. So here's some comments that came to us. No matter what, life insurance is a necessity. Every time I see charity campaigns for families that have lost loved ones and don't have funds forth, I can't help but think, why didn't they get life insurance? Even if you're young and healthy, life insurance for you, I can't stress it enough. So another person writes, I did not listen to the video yet, but want to add that a rabbi, insurance agent, once showed me in a sefer, can't remember which one, as it happened over 20 years ago, that it is a school for long life to buy life insurance. And the sefer explains why, because in the days of Golas, the mazel is with the goyim. In the days of Golas, the mazel with the goyim. And the mazel in favor of an insurance company is that the insured live a long, long life, and the insurance company thereby need not pay. Okay? Special rates for Anash. We see special plans for Shluchim advertised. Why can't Anash have access to discounted plans as well? May Anash live in poverty compared to many Shluchim. Many Anash live in poverty compared to many Shluchim. And a few other comments about supporting it. And as I said, I see nothing against it. On the contrary. And that's why I just wanted to bring some of the comments. Good. Regarding bullying, this is another topic that we discussed in last episode. So someone says, look at the Geras HaTshuva, the end of chapter 11. He says, thank you very much on your weekly podcast. It's beautiful and touching to see how a Chassid goes in the footsteps of the Rebbe and speaks publicly about Torah and Chassidus and addressing important questions that people are asking. May many people learn from you. After Gimel Tammuz, we yearn toward the days of light of when the Rebbe was sitting and teaching a Torah. And obviously it's not enough just to have yearning, but the Rebbe wants to teach us that we also can do something like him, and we can sit and spread Torah publicly and address the matters of the hour according to the language of Chassidus, and you are a living example for this. Much success in your Avedis HaKodesh. Thank you very much. I actually didn't look in the end of chapter 11 in Geras HaTshuva about bullied. It means I Geras HaTshuva. Okay, I will look it up. Maybe some of you may know what that is. I should have looked it up. Sorry about that. Okay, Psychology and Chassidus. With regards to your discussion in episode 224 regarding psychology and Chassidus and which stream of philosophy is comparable with Chassidus, in an interview with Carl Jung for his 80th birthday, he said, quote, but do you know who anticipated my entire psychology in the 18th century? The Chassidic Rabbi Ber from Mezrich, whom they called the Great Maggid. He was a most impressive man, end of quote. I don't know enough about Jungian philosophy to know, or psychology, you should say, to know what that means, but it is interesting. You can see the quote on page 271, 272, C.G. Jung speaking, interviews and encounters with C.G. Jung. And there's a link here to online. I did not research this, interesting quote. I would definitely want to verify and make sure it's correct, but thank you for sharing that. There was a follow-up regarding Pidyanis, and there's a follow-up regarding parenting. I'm going to push those off, again, due to time constraints. I'm going to go to the third part of the Chassidus question that we've been addressing the last few weeks. And very fascinating topic, and the question is regarding the difference between the Kabbalah of the Arizal and the Kabbalah of the Ramak. Or the Ramak comes first and then the Arizal. So let me sum up what we've spoke about. In different Sfarim, Kabbalah Sfarim, as well as Chassidus, talks about that there is a fundamental difference between the two. With the Ramak, with a few key points that are made, that the Ramak spoke in Toyu and the Arizal in Tikkun. The Ramak spoke in Nukudis, points, meaning the spheres as points, and the Arizal in Spheres and Partsufim, structures, which means also, in a sense, that's Tikkun, that it comes into a full-blown, interconnected, interwoven structure of Kol Iskalus. And the Ramak in Nukudis points. Also, Ramak is more like the Pshat. He gathered together the Pshat of Kabbalah, and the Arizal is the Sodom Kabbalah. And last week we began to discuss the difference between the Ramak, who did not know of the Tzimtzum, and the Arizal, who did speak and was Machadash, the Chiddush of the Tzimtzum Harishon, the great Tzimtzum. And essentially, in brief, is the Ramak's understanding of Pshitus of Elokus. Well, now let's make it clear. Understanding meaning understanding. For us, our understanding is somewhat still relates to existence, albeit in a very distant way. So Keser can be called Ein Sof, and he says that Keser is more distant from Ein Sof than Asiyah is from Keser, but still, according to Chassidus, Keser is still closer to Ein Sof, so there's some type of commonality, which explains, of course, our relationship with the divine, which is the essence of Kabbalah. How is it the relationship between the Adam HaTachton to the Adam HaElyon? We have a relationship. The Arizal, by the Tzimtzum Harishon, introduced the concept of Ein Arech. Tzimtzum Harishon means that the Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum is completely of a different paradigm. And if you want to have existence in any form or fashion, including Keser, including Ak, you need a Tzimtzum, a complete concealment. Complete. Not Kipshute. Because from the point of view of definitely from the point of view of the higher levels, the Tzimtzum doesn't impact. But from the point of view of the recipient, you need it to be a complete paradigm shift, a complete quantum leap, which gives us a far deeper understanding in the Ein Arech of Elokus, as opposed to the Erech. That's one key difference between the two of them. And that's why the Pardes, the Ramak, speaks in Ilu V'Olu, language of Ilu V'Olu, like the Alter Rebbe says in the Geras HaKedesh Siman Chof. What does he say there? He speaks about that this Shtalshlus in the spheres themselves, in the Kelim, is in the form of Ilu V'Olu. Whereas the Tzimtzum Harishon, meaning from the Arizal, creates that distance where you can't talk Ilu V'Olu. Ilu V'Olu is cause and effect, meaning there's some commonality from the cause to the effect. Now, the Ramaka for sure, and I'm going to speak about it a little later more at length, understood that God is beyond it all. It's not like the Ramak had a limited, God forbid, understanding of God, except we don't have a relationship with that aspect. That's beyond us. So paradoxically, the Tzimtzum actually gives us a more relationship with the infinite, I would say the Ein Arech of Elokus than the Ramak. The Ramak focuses mostly on the existence as it relates to the divine. Okay. And that Arizal is the Ein Arech. And that itself, now that we know there's a Tzimtzum, then we can start talking about Lifnei Tzimtzum, because we understand that there's this complete distance. So that would be a key difference. And in that context, it doesn't seem that how could the Alter Rebbe say, and that's the two questions that we're addressing, is what's the difference, and how could the Alter Rebbe say it's B'chal Masai Mona in the Maimorim, which what I quoted, the Maimorim HaKetzorim. Now, I want to just add a few more sources and then elaborate a little bit more. There's a letter from the Rebbe Rashab, a fascinating letter, which I want to quote right now. In the Igris Kodesh of the Rebbe Rashab, page 94, he speaks about a question that he's asked, and we should have talked about it another time. It's an interesting letter, a fascinating letter. Whether there's something, when you talk about a behemoth, an animal, whether there's once an animal dies, is there anything that it goes back to its source? Because from the Ramak it appears it doesn't. And the Rebbe Rashab is adamant to say that absolutely has a source, and the Nefesh HaBamis has a source. It's a different source. And he says there, quoting the Alter Rebbe, in the Alter Rebbe's Igeres 34, in his Igris Kodesh, not Igris Kodesh in Tanya. In Igris Kodesh that's printed, page 89, the Rebbe Rashab cites that he cites the words, these words, that ikir halos man zesh halos netzusin le nisker ele b'Kabbalah Arizal levado, and that the Ramak did not know about teyu shviras hakelim and birurim. So that's one thing I wanted to cite. I'm going to talk about this some more soon. Another thing is that I wanted to bring some more sources in Chassidus now. In Sidrim Dach 217c, Reshut Zayin Gimel, he explains another difference between Ramak and the Arizal, that the Ramak associates Havaya only with Tiferes, whereas the Arizal associates it with other spheres. And he explains the same reason. Because the Ramak spoke in Toyu. He said that's why he speaks only in Tiferes and not the other spheres, because he does not speak about the Partzufim. In Eira Teira Va'era, the Tzemach Tzaddik 93b, Tzadik Gimel Beis, uses the same thing to explain why the Arizal calls Chesed, the same level that Ramak calls Gedula. Because Gedula is more relates to Toyu, the Eira of Toyu, the Eira Chesed of Toyu, as opposed to Tikkun. So you see here again the differences. So all this amplifies the question. So how do we say it's B'chlal Masayim Mona to say that the Kabbalah of the Arizal encompasses that of the Ramak? But let's go further with the Tzimtzum discussion. If you look in Perek Beis in Tanya, there's a Hagah. A similar Hagah in Perek Memches 48 in Tanya, and a similar in Perek Tes of Shar Yuchid V'Amuna, chapter 9. And what's the theme there? That Alter Rebbe brings, that the Rambam says, Hu Amadu Hu Yedei Hu Yedua, that God is one with His knowledge. And that's why Kulam B'Chochma Sis, so that's why he says that's why a neshama that comes from Chochma, from the Moyach Ha'av, in this case the Moyach of Ola Machshava, is one with the divine. Because God is one with His Machshava, with His Das. But comes a question, and that's what the Hagah addresses in Perek Beis, and I said the similar idea. He says, what about Kabbalah? He doesn't ask the question, but clearly there's a question, and that's how God comes to answer a question. In Kabbalah, God is not one with Das. He's higher than Das. The famous Maharal that disagrees with the Rambam. You can't define the God by Das. So the Alter Rebbe writes, no, that Chen Hiskimu, the Chachmei Kabbalah, also agreed with the Rambam. And he brings the Ramak in the Parshas, that God is one with the spheres. And then he goes on and says, V'chein Yetziva Milsa, this also is consistent and also can be reconciled with the Arizal. Because the Arizal says the Tzimtzum Arishin, the Ramak you could say, because he's one with the divine, because he's talking about how godliness is one with the spheres, because he has that connection. But the Arizal comes and introduces that Tzimtzum. The Ramak didn't know of it. Tzimtzum implies and suggests that God is completely, the divine is completely, Eidin Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum is completely not, relates to any spheres. That's why you need a Tzimtzum. It's even Milsa, because once you have the Tzimtzum, and once it's Neslabish, Eidis, and Kalim, and not Silas, you could say that that's also the case. That's what it says there in the Hagah, and he repeats that, as I said, similarly, some Shinuyim in Perek Memches, chapter 48 in Tanya, and chapter 9 in Shar Yuchid V'Amuna. Now, there's actually, interestingly, so here you see again the difference between the Ramak and the Arizal. And the Alter Rebbe makes it clear in the Hagah that the Ramak and the Arizal, or else he would have just put it into one fell swoop and say the Ramak and the Arizal. No, there's the Ramak, that fits with the Rambam, because there's a relationship between the divine and existence, and Das, and the Spheres, and that Arizal is higher. But then he says, in Atzilus, that Arizal would also agree. Once it's Mislabish and Atzilus. So the question is asked, that part that he says also in Atzilus, is also according to the Ramak that way? That L'maylam Atzilus, it's also not connected Das with Elokus? So it's actually in Eira Teira, Chana, on page 228, has two ways to explain this Hagah. Whether the Ramak is also only speaking Atzilus and higher the Atzilus, he would agree with Arizal, which means that Ramak also has a sense of the Ein Aryeh. Or the Ramak, no, the Ramak is like the Rambam, speaks only as it's connected to existence, and you don't speak about how it's beyond that, higher than Atzilus. And in Amonis Alakus and Derech Mitzvah is mashma like the first way, the second way, that the Ramak is speaking specifically in Atzilus and not higher. Okay. Now, let's take this the next step here. So what do we come away with this? That there's two approaches, there's two elements here. Now, on an ostensible level, it would appear, okay, so different approaches of how to explain Achdus Hashem. The Ramak speaks, like he says in Vayelech Samach Vav, more in that way, that understands Achdus in that sense, when there is ultimately some relationship, but he does not speak about that which is completely beyond. That's Ein Sof. That's not it's not Keser. And that Arizal introduces Shalei Berach. Now, when the Ramak and the Arizal were teaching, you could say two schools of thought. But when you look in retrospect as it evolved, which is how Chassidus explains it, and especially with the quotations that I quoted, and I quoted from, let me just give you exactly the sources. I quoted from, 1 minute. The Drush of the Aryeh, the end of Eitz Chaim, and as well as the Akdama to Eitz Chaim, where he says clearly how things evolved, the Shtalshus of Kabbalah, you clearly understand that when we look at it now in retrospect, these are two ways that are necessary in understanding the whole picture. And this would explain the B'chlal Masai Mona. Why? Because even after the Arizal explains the distance, Arizal doesn't say there's no relationship with the divine. Mahu Chan Nafata Chanan. As we just said, the essence spheres of Atzilus, there is a Hu Madahu Yedeya. Except Arizal introduced something that's completely beyond. But even when you know what's beyond, that doesn't mean it negates that which is a relationship. That's why the Arizal has a whole explanation that there's a Kav, and there's a Shimu, and there's Eris and Kalim, and there's Adam Kadmin, and Shviras HaKelim, and Tikkun, and Partzufim. Why? Because the Arizal is coming to also explain that as much as I introduced to you now that it's completely distant, the divine, that same divine also willed and wanted to have a relationship with us. So without the Arizal, you can say we don't have that much a connection to the Ein Arech. The Ramak, it's more of Erech, so to speak, like the Rambam. We speak about God as He relates to us. We were created in His image. But not that which is beyond the image, beyond the spheres. The Arizal, however, introduces that which is beyond. But that doesn't negate what they taught us. On the contrary, you can say that's the process. First, in history, we learned, as though the sources I just cited, we learned more how we relate to God, so to speak, on our terms. We were created the divine image. As Kabbalah went further and got closer to Mashiach's times and the darkness of Golus, we dug deeper and we got revelation from the Arizal and those that came after him. That's something that's completely Shalei Be'erech. At the same time, that Shalei Be'erech also shows and wants to have a relationship with us. So now we have a whole full picture. So that's B'chlal Masai Mona. Because that Arizal also talks about the relationship with God and Atzilus and Eris and Kalim, and whether the opinion that Eris, the reconciliation, Eris Pshutim, Eris Mitziyarim. So the Ramak is more Pshutim because he didn't know of the Tzimtzum, as the Rebbe explains in the Sikh of B'Shalach Tovshin Tezvav. The Arizal, because with the Tzimtzum, he could actually explain that it has a Tziyur because of the Tzimtzum. But he also speaks about a level that's beyond and higher than the Tzimtzum. So we have a much fuller picture of both the infinite, this distance of the divine, its relationship with us, and how they both join together in one ultra unity. Because at the end of the day, Havaya Lakim, the infinite distance, is also connected to our relationship. So if you're talking as a philosopher, and you want to see the philosophy of the Ramak, the philosophy of the Arizal, looks like there's different. And Chassidus Taka acknowledges there are differences. But when you look at the whole picture in a holistic way, it all comes together. This is similar as the Rebbe Taka says in B'Shalach Tovshin Tezvav, which was a sikh after the Maimer. That year the Rebbe spoke the Maimer on Basel Lagani. He spoke about the Teirim Shlilim, Teirim Chiyuvim, describing God either with a name or by saying, negating a name from Him. So he spoke about, so he said that there's the famous three opinions, the Drush Gimel Shittas from the Tzemach Tzedek, where the three opinions, whether it's the spheres are just the Kalim and not Eris, or the spheres are also an Eir also has a Tzir, or the Tivuch, the reconciliation between the Pardes and the Arizal, different ways, that the main Tzir is Mitzad the Keli, and the Keli also creates a Tzir into the Eir, that reconciles. So the Rebbe says all of them are Eile Ve'el Divrei Elokim Chaim. They're all true. One is Mamayla Lamata, that's Pshutim. Mamata Lamayla, Mitsuyir, has shape, has definition. And then the Kava Mtsoi, that is both. What do you see from that? At the time, it was a machlekes between Kabbalah, and you say this is one school of thought, another school of thought. But Chassidus and Kabbalah, B'chlal Teira, everything has a truth in its dimension. But especially in Chassidus comes and describes the whole picture, so then everything fits in. Sometimes we emphasize how it is beyond structure, beyond identity and definition, sometimes how it's part of definition, sometimes how it's a combination of both. Which is why, for example, when we say a bracha and mitzvahs, is a mitzvah the divine will, or is it the specific mitzvah that you're doing? Which is more important, the klal or the prat? That all mitzvahs are equal in that, or laniach tefillin, lahadlik ner Shabbos Kodesh. So the answer is, it depends. There's sometimes we focus on this is God's will. Sometimes we focus on what He wants, the specific. Sometimes we focus on both. All are necessary. And that's ultimately how we understand the same thing with the Ramak and the Arizal. So the Ramak, they all become part of one approach. The Rebbe says this also regarding the Kabbalah, let's say, of Emek HaMelech from Yisrael Surug. There was a time that Rabbi Chaim Vital writes beferish that he's the only one authorized to teach the Arizal's teachings. And he beferish prohibited, and there were Kabbalim that would not look in Yisrael Surug's Kabbalah, Rabbi Yisrael Surug's Kabbalah. The Alter Rebbe brought from Emek HaMelech and from Mishnah Chassidim, and zusammengeflochten, he interwove it into one bigger holistic picture. So in that context, the Ramak plays a role in the whole unity. Where's the Ramak's role? Like he says, with the Rambam. Why does Alter Rebbe bring that? Even though the Arizal is the final say, because you need to know that too. The Achdus Unamada and Hu Amada Hu Yedei Hu Yedua. And that's part of also the picture. At the same time, we need to know that Arizal's approach, and that Arizal in Atzilus, he agrees with them. And yet we know there's something that's higher than Atzilus, due to the tzimtzum that Arizal was mechadish. Now there's more to be said about this, especially some very fascinating sikhs from the Rebbe, which will tie it all together, and I hope to do that next week. And with that, maybe we can conclude the whole picture. I just want to make sure I covered everything here. Yeah, and I also want to bring about something from Anos Rashelet and also from Rabbi Isaac Homlet on this topic. But we'll leave that for next week. And let us go now to the 3 essays that we do every week. So we'll start with essay number 1. Is it dark in here? Yechiel Ruderman, age 24, Jerusalem, Israel. He's a copywriter in the Misad Apirsum of Afikim, in the publicity department of Afikim. So it's a Hebrew essay. Is it dark in here? And he talks about the Shita of how to establish Chassidus in the light of what's going on in the religious, in the very Haredish, on the different the upheavals going on in the world today. He says, in this essay we will present the concept of fear and and its effect on people, how we look at the darkness in the world today, and all the charod, all the upheavals taking place, and all the fearful events, and looking from the eyes of Chassidus. And he brings all these different upheavals in all different segments of society. Goes into explaining, is cheshach, darkness, which includes all these different upheavals, is it a substance of its own, or is darkness only the absence of light? And Chassidus emphasizes also that it's an entity of its own. So though they contradict each other, in truth there's 2 different levels of darkness. And goes on to speak about how you transform actually darkness to light, speaks about the difference between fear, charoda, literally, I guess, fright and fear, and how we can overcome it by understanding the different approach to darkness. And he speaks about it in 3 steps. As we saw in the Nisayan, when Avram was faced with a Nisayan, a test, which of course terrified him, but then he realized it was just a test, so he went through different steps, and he applies those 3 steps of how to deal with darkness in our lives. Very interesting and unique essay, and comes to ultimately teach us that darkness, truly the substance of darkness, is truly another form of inverted light, and that's what we want to reveal. So this essay and all other essays can be seen at meaningfullife.com, My Life. We post them as they come, these new essays, as they are being, as we read them each week. We post new ones. You can also get them when you subscribe to our weekly newsletter. The next essay is How Not to Hurt the People You Love. Aryeh Gurewitz, age 26, Brooklyn, New York, freelance writer. He's actually the first place winner of the first year's essay contest. He writes, one of the most fundamental requirements for a leader of the Jewish people is his sensitivity. From Moshe Rabbeinu until the Rebbe, our leaders have been renowned for this quality. While we may not find it likely that we could reach the level of sensitivity that they displayed, we can and should certainly try to emulate their ways. In this spirit, this essay will provide a practical approach to being more sensitive to other people based on a key insight into the nature of pain. This insight is explained by the Mittler Rebbe in his discourse titled Parshas Shalom. So he talks about the Chassidus on the source of pain, your pain and your needs, practical steps towards greater sensitivity. He's a great writer. Aryeh is a great writer, and of course he lives up to his reputation. Well worth reading, well done as well. And the third essay is from the Chassidic approach to self-control, Chana, age 16, Montreal, Canada, student, 10th grade. Contemporary issues she addresses, lacking limits. Looking at the wedding Viennese table, scanning the extravagant delicacies, and watching everyone enjoy themselves, you can't seem to decide whether you should take the chocolate fudge ice cream or the delicious chocolate and cream bar. You decide to try both. Nowadays, many people are unable to control the quantity and quality of the food they ingest. They feel helpless. Is it even possible to control one's desires? And goes on to say the Alter Rebbe in Tanya lays ground for the fundamental principle with which one can learn to have complete control over his desires. Applying the principle of Chassidus, the mind governs over the heart. It goes on to explain the methodology for self-control according to Chassidus, dominance, not prominence, practical practice. Again, very practical one, and I believe could help many people deal with these challenges. I always say help because we all know these are difficult challenges, but yet these essays, the effort invested and their practical suggestions are really enlightening and empowering. Thank you for that. So with that, we conclude this Rosh Chodesh Elul episode 225 of My Life. We're here every week from 8 to 9 p.m. Everyone should have a real, compassionate, mellow besoda, accessible and beautiful, blessed Chodesh Elul, a month of love and only love and beautiful experiences in life. Everyone be blessed, and until next Sunday, everyone have a freilichen and Chodesh HaCheshbon Chodesh Elul. Thank you.